Greetings, First Universalist and First Unitarian community here in Rochester. This morning, Reverend Sherry and I got the news after our service that folks were not able to hear us over Zoom. And so here we are. I am going to offer you both the reading from this morning as well as the sermon that I preached so that you'll be able to hear it and to engage with it. We are so very sorry that this has happened, and we are just learning how to do new things together and hoping for better options and better audio for our online worshiping community for next week. Our reading this morning comes from a blog called Leaving Evidence from the fabulous Mia Mingus. Mia Mingus is a writer, educator, and trainer for transformative justice and disability justice. She is a queer, physically disabled, Korean transracial and transnational adoptee raised in the Caribbean. She works for community, interdependence, and home for all of us, not just some of us, and longs for a world where disabled children can live free from violence with dignity and love. As her work for liberation evolves and deepens, her roots remain firmly planted in ending sexual violence. This is an excerpt from Mia Mingus's writing entitled Dreaming Accountability. What if accountability wasn't scary? Take a breath and let that sink in for a second. What if accountability wasn't scary? It will never be easy or comfortable. But what if it wasn't scary? What if our own accountability wasn't something we ran from, but something we ran towards and desired, appreciated, held as sacred? What if we cherished opportunities to take accountability as precious opportunities to practice liberation, to practice love, to practice the kinds of people, elders to be, and souls we want to be, to practice that which we can only practice in real time? After all, we can only practice courage when we are afraid. We can only practice taking accountability when we have wronged or harmed or hurt. Practice yields the sharpest analysis. Accountability is not a destination. It is a skill we can build and practice. It is an art, a craft, an alchemy we can learn how to wield, just as we have learned how to wield hurt and shame and fear. If accountability is a skill we value, then we must make room and make commitments to practice it ourselves each day, each week, each year. We can start small and build up our skills from there. We can start with our everyday relationships and those closest to us, our families, our friends, our partners, our coworkers, the earth. We can start with our self-accountability and the ways that we don't show up for ourselves. We can acknowledge how most of us are in an abusive relationship with ourselves. We blow past our own boundaries. We punish and beat ourselves up in terrible ways. We can start with the ways we treat and talk to ourselves, ways that we would clearly recognize as abuse if it were being done to another person. After all, our abusive relationship with ourselves lays the groundwork for an abusive world. What if we embraced accountability as a reflection of our undeniable, incredible, tender humanity? As a magnificent example of what it means to be human and flawed and in relationship with another? What if we welcomed the quickening of our pulse and the beating of our hearts as signals of being alive and caring for what is most important to us, our relationships with each other? And what if we listened to that fear, the fear of losing someone important to us or of losing ourselves? Therein ends our reading this morning. Dear ones, for me, accountability is something concrete. It is not a dream, though we can dream about what it could look like. It is rather a set of actions we take, a practice, even an art. At the top of our sermon this morning, I want to invite you to take a moment of reflection with me. Who are your people? What are their names? I feel like the names of your people are important. So if it is available to you, I want to invite you to make a list of their names, either on your order of service or on a scrap of paper around you or on your phone, whatever is available to you. Let us make that list. Who are your people? Who are the folks you feel responsible for and responsible to? Who are the folks you allow to care for you? Let us just take a silent moment to jot down and honor their names. As we look at our lists, I wonder if these are all people you get along with. I wonder if there have been moments when these people have hurt you, moments when you have hurt them. Sometimes in the heat of really deep hurt, someone falls off of our list, which actually might be a soft way of putting it. Sometimes we take pretty extensive actions to erase them from our lists or cross them off or even tear their name from the page. I wonder if there was someone who has come to mind for you who is not on your list because of some sort of conflict. Perhaps they still belong on your list now. Or perhaps it would be beneficial to take their name into your prayer and meditation life to see if they should be on your list or not. Or perhaps there is a need for more accountability between you two. Perhaps there are still things to be worked through, things you might need to process, old wounds, conversations that feel both possible and impossible. Discernment about who our people are, about who we are accountable to, is a really important part of accountability. This list matters. It is both your circle of influence and your circle of care and your community. It is the people you have the deep joy of loving and caring for, as well as the people you have hurt and those who have hurt you. Being in human relationships is complicated. Being a human in relationship is complicated. We are Unitarian Universalists. We are Unitarians and Universalists worshiping under one tent and across one Zoom screen. Our shared call towards covenant, towards making promises with one another and with our source, is a theology of accountability. In mutual relationship, we know a God of our understanding and we know one another. The covenantal relationship at the roots of both of our traditions was, of course, originally with the Christian God of our ancestors' understanding, a covenant whose foundations rest in the Jewish tradition. And that covenantal understanding has expanded to be both and, to be both about the promises we make to our source and sustenance, however you choose to define that in this space and in your own truth, and to be about the promises we make to one another. Tender and fragile promises that only humans can make. Promises we truly commit to, but also we know we have broken them again and again and again. It is our way. No one here is here to be perfect. If you want to find a group of folks learning to be perfect together, church might not be the best place for you. But what we promise to one another matters. And what we do when those promises are broken also matters. I love that Mia Mingus is inviting us into accountability as something we seek because we know it is an integral part of our liberation. I love this because too often being held accountable means punishment to so many of us. It means being forced to admit something or even having to suffer some kind of a consequence. Mia Mingus reframes this to say accountability can be something we seek because we care about one another. It can be something we seek because we care about one another. It can be something we seek to heal from shame and blame. It can be something we remain open to rather than closing ourselves off and succumbing to that hot, wet blanket of shame that keeps us silent and not saying anything and hoping this moment of hurting another person will just go away. Do you know this feeling? I know I do. To speak up and own when we have caused harm, to seek out ways to repair and even transform that harm can be especially freeing. Difficult at times, but also deeply freeing. These practices can shape and change our experiences to engage in accountability honestly and tenderly, has the capacity to heal our shame and trauma, and even to heal our communities. Dear ones, it is a joy and a privilege to be here with you, with all of you, this Sunday for this new experience together. We are sitting in a somewhat new relationship between First Universalist and First Unitarian. Worshiping together has brought us into a whole new way of being in relationship this morning. But is that actually the whole truth? I think the whole truth is that we are in a new practice between two congregations who have been in relationship for nearly 200 years. If you look around you, or even if you imagine those that you know from these two communities, First Universalist and First Unitarian, I imagine there are some people here that you know and others that you do not know. Yet we have been accountable to one another since the merger of Unitarians and Universalists in 1961 officially, and I would argue that we have been accountable to one another well before that, as liberal religious communities serving the same city. And with that relationship comes the power to care for one another and the power to do harm. Both are true. Both have been true. There has been a history between us and a possibility so tender and new, it feels like a green shoot rising up out of a tender piece of earth that could use a bit of water and gentle handling. I wonder what accountability will look like for us as we continue along this partnership. I wonder what may develop in the weeks to come and even the years to come, born out of this new way of being together. I wonder if you will find one another in the list of names I have asked you to create, a list of names I invite you to return to this week to see who else might need to be on your list. Let this list of our people be a living list. Mia Mingus writes, accountability is not a destination. It is a skill we can build and practice. It is an art, a craft, an alchemy we must learn how to wield just as we have learned how to wield hurt and shame and fear. If accountability is a skill we value, then we must make room and make commitments to practice it ourselves each day, each week, each year. We can start small and build up our skills from there. We can start with everyday relationships and those closest to us, our families, our friends, our partners, our coworkers, the earth. I wonder where you can start today and even tomorrow to build practices of accountability. I wonder where you can make that first tender move to ask someone for what you need, to vocalize a hurt you have experienced, to apologize for some form of harm you have caused. She reminds us this is not solely about the big conflict and big issues that come to mind. It's about folks we interact with every single day. It is about our own desire for liberation. It is about those practices in our smaller communities that can then be brought to even larger circles of influence and mutual care. It is about treating ourselves well and showing up for ourselves as our best and bravest advocates. Let us release practices rooted in shame and fear and embrace accountability as our covenantal responsibility and in our desire for a more fulfilling and rich life. Let us find ways to own the harm we have caused. Let us seek out opportunities to name our experiences and our needs as a way to be accountable to ourselves. And as we grow together as a worshiping community under one tent and on one Zoom account, let us learn to lean on one another, to be in a different relationship, to heal and grow together. Amen. Blessed be, and may it be so.